America is different. Today, when American exceptionalism, as it is called, has become the subject of academic study, the United States, except in wealth and military power, is less exceptional than it was in the years when it was to be reached only by sailing ship across the Atlantic. Then, before American culture had been universalized by Hollywood, the technology of television, and the international music industry, America really was a different place and society from the old world, which had given it birth. Europeans who made the voyage noted differences of every sort, not only political and economic, but human and social as well. Americans were bigger than Europeans. Even their slaves were bigger than their African forebears, thanks to the superabundance of food that American farms produced. American parents allowed their children a freedom not known in Europe. They shrank from punishing their sons and daughters in the ways European fathers and mothers did. Ulysses S. Grant, the future General-in-Chief of the Union Armies and President of the United States, recalled in his memoirs that there was never any scolding or punishment by my parents, no objection to rational enjoyments such as fishing, going to the creek a mile away to swim in summer, taking a horse and visiting my grandparents in the adjoining county, 15 miles off, skating on the ice in winter, taking a horse and sleigh when there was snow on the ground. It was a description of childhood as experienced in most prosperous country-dwelling families of the period. The Grants were modestly well-to-do, Jesse Grant, the future president's father, having a tanning business and also working an extensive property of arable land and forest. But then most established American families, and the Grants had come to the New World in 1630, were prosperous. It was prosperity that underlay their easy way with their offspring, since they were not obliged to please neighbors by constraining their children. The children of the prosperous were nevertheless well-behaved because they were schooled and church-going. The two went together, though not in lockstep. Lincoln was a notably indulgent father, though he was not a doctrinal Christian. Church-going America, overwhelmingly Protestant before 1850, needed to read the Bible, and north of the Mason-Dixon line, which informally divided North from South, 4/5 of Americans could read and write. Almost all American children in the North, and effectively all in New England, went to school, a far higher proportion than in Europe, where literacy, even in Britain, France, and Germany, lay around 2/3. America was also becoming college-going, with the seats of higher education, Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Princeton, the College of William and Mary, established and flourishing. America could afford to fund and run colleges because it was already visibly richer than Europe, rich agriculturally, though it was not yet a food-exporting economy, and increasingly rich industrially. It was a newspaper country with a vast newspaper-reading public and a large number of local and some widely distributed city newspapers. Its medical profession was large and skillful, and the inventiveness and mechanical aptitude of its population was remarked upon by all visitors. So too was the vibrant and passionate nature of its politics. America was already a country of ideas and movements, highly conscious of its birth in freedom and its legacy of revolution. Anti-imperialism had been its founding principle. During the decades before the Civil War, America was experiencing an industrial boom and its own distinctive industrial revolution. England's industrial revolution had taken its impetus from the development of steam power, fueled by the island's abundant deposits of coal and directed to the exploitation of its large deposits of metal ores. Early 19th century America was also beginning to dig coal and iron ore, of which its soil contained enormous quantities. But at the outset it was two other sources of power which drove its proliferating factories and workshops: water power and wood. The rivers of New England, New York, and Pennsylvania were harnessed to turn water wheels, and its extensive forests to supply timber for burning. In Europe, the days were long gone when forests could be cut down to supply heat. The continent, outside Scandinavia and the Russian interior, was highly deforested. In America, trees were still an encumbrance which had to be felled to provide land for farming, but which also, when sawn, provided the raw material for every sort of building and manufactured item. America needed deforestation if its soils were to be farmed in the future, and in that process industrialization and land clearing went hand in hand. During the 1830s and later, New York City consumed several million loads of wood every year, cut and stripped from Maine and New Jersey. It was only gradually that mines were dug and extended, originally by immigrants from the English coalfields and Welsh valleys, but by 1860, production in the Pennsylvanian anthracite fields had increased 40-fold in 30 years. By that date, a distinctive economic geography of the United States could be discerned, with expanding industrial regions centered on New York and Philadelphia, exploited coalfields in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and the Allegheny region of the Appalachians, a developing industrial region around Pittsburgh, and a thriving textile and engineering zone in southern New England. In the North, the proportion of farm workers in the labor force had fallen below 40%, while it remained above 80% in the South. An economic map would show that there was no industrial center south of a line drawn from St. Louis to Louisville to Baltimore. In the South, 9/10 of the population lived in the countryside, but in the North, only a quarter. Timber also provided the steam power for paddle boats, which by 1850 were to be seen on every navigable waterway, and the railway locomotives, which were becoming familiar on the tracks which were stretching out to link all the more important cities to one another and to the seaboard ports. By 1850, there were 9,000 miles of track in the United States. By 1860, 30,000. Rivers and then canals had been the means of transportation and distribution in the early stages of the boom. Canal boats and river steamers were rapidly overtaken in importance by the railroad. By 1850, America had surpassed Britain, home of the railroad revolution, in miles of operating track. Indeed, American track mileage exceeded that of the rest of the world put together.